Hello and welcome to Autosport's Top 50 Drivers of 2024. We're into the final episode now, counting down 10 to 1. I'm Kevin Turner. I'm joined in the studio once again by Gary Watkins and Haydn Cobb to run through the drivers who made this list. And obviously in this episode we are talking about the top 10, the big ones. Some surprises in there, some ones that are not surprising at all. So let's get into it. So number 10, and then we can finish with the World Rally Championship for this particular top 50. Thierry Neuville. Second 5 times, third 4 times, I think, in the championship. And then finally, he's finally done it. So he's got into the top 10.
Sneaks into the top 10.
And we had quite a long debate about this, didn't we, Haydn? Because quite often the WRC champion is very high. In fact, in 2005, Sebastian Loeb was actually number 1. He actually knocked out all the... Right. I think that may have been we can't decide between the Fernando Alonso, Kimi Raikkonen camps. Therefore, we're going to have a rally driver in it instead. I suspect I wasn't here at the time. Well, unless you remember, Gary.
I don't. I'm afraid.
No,
at my age, you don't remember that.
But
and so I'd probably say this is probably the lowest world ranking for a World Rally champion or World Rally driver in this list there's been for a long time.
Correctly, considering that we've been bigging up 2 part-timers for the last...
I think... The reason I say
half an hour
sneaking in is very much how I felt it was. No credit taken away from Neuville. Did what he needed to do.
Yeah.
Picked up the points. Also not worked it, but knew this weird conjangled point system that the championship used this year, and basically banked when needed to. And probably in a silly way, knew that rivals would drop points through missing rounds or crashing, and therefore did the job that he needed to do.
We should also point out in his defence that because he was leading the championship from the very first rally in Monte Carlo, where he became the first, and I think now they've changed the points
again.
He scored the maximum, didn't he? 30 possible ones. He's the only one that did that, and they've changed it again for next year because it's a ridiculous point system. But he was sweeping the road.
Yes.
So people like Rovin Perez and Ogier could come in and benefit from that. Although I did rather enjoy Ogier's point when Neuville started complaining about it. It's like, well, I've been complaining about that for 10 years, mate, and you always said to shut up. So
I'm glad you
could try not leading the championship, which I thought was entirely fair enough as well.
Yeah.
But he was doing that. He did cut out some of the mistakes that he'd received in the past. He didn't crack under pressure.
Yeah, and like Japan, I know recency bias is one thing, but when the mechanical issue on the first day in Japan lost a whole chunk of time. Younger Neuville could have easily tried to overdrive it or just get frustrated.
Or he'd have done a Tanak.
Yes.
And thrown it at scenery.
And just basically that would have played too much on his mind and that. But he'd had the calmness and the understanding of the wider picture and knowing, all right, end of the day we get this fixed, climb up the rankings again. I know I only need to beat Tanak by certain things, this, that and the other. Did it and sealed the title. So
does the lack of a depth in the field affect where he's ended up?
Yeah, I think it has to. It feels just a little bit like Thierry Boutsen winning the Formula 1 World Championship, doesn't it? Just a little bit like that. Like a good driver who you expect to see in the top half dozen in a decent car, but you'd always expect someone better to be there. And the 2 main ones, as we said, were part-timers.
Yeah.
And the other one that could have been in the same car.
And with the limited manufacturer presence as well in the top level too, means there is just fewer opportunities at the sharp end as well. So I think he's in the right area for this list. No higher, but being any lower would be a disservice.
Yeah, I think that's where we ended up, wasn't it? Okay.
Are we not feeling pity for him that he's finally done it after, being a strong contender, knocking on the door? He's finally won it. Well, we've got to put him in the top 10.
Maybe. If he wins title next year, off we go with Raven back and everyone like that.
Well, so, I'll see if you were doing we're obsessed with lists, clearly. If you're doing greatest... I am, that's fair. That's fair. Greatest rally drivers who didn't win the World Rally Championship, he's taken himself off the list now. He'd be much higher up on that list than he will be on the World Champions list. It's back to Marco... Well, it was Marco Len anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, damn, that's ruined that one now. Right, let's move on. Number 9, Shota Boy, Super Formula, Super GT champion. We've already talked about how incredible that... I mean, and he didn't just narrowly win it either, did he, in Super Formula?
No.
Super, yeah.
And, there's some class acts who've done the double. I think he's the 6th driver to do the double.
I believe that's right.
Obviously, Super Formula was called different things in Formula Nippon, Formula 3000, and whatever. But a driver we've been talking about already, Andre Lotterer. He did it back in 2011 when he probably was the best driver outside of Formula One, because 2011 he won 2 titles in Japan and Le Mans in the closest ever time finish. So yeah, it's some accolade, isn't it, winning both those?
No, he probably had a car advantage in Super GT because the Toyota was the car to have. But there's so much success ballast and all that sort of stuff. But it was, again, the same with Super Formula. It was
also
comfortable as winning those championships.
He knew how to win titles in Super Formula this year. Seems like he had a very methodical approach to his racing, in Super Formula in particular, giving him that sort of edge, building this season together. So, yeah, very, very fast. I must admit, didn't know a great deal about the driver before this year, much to my chagrin, but fair play. He's put in a phenomenal year, and top 10 easily.
If we're brutally honest and we're being completely objective about driver quality, we would probably have more Japanese drivers from Super GT and Super Formula in there, wouldn't we? But we try and spread the joy a bit in terms of some of those other touring car categories and GT3 categories that we've talked about.
Well, I hope
before.
we can go on to do something in the, on a broader global.
That is one of the
arena.
Frustrating things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because quite often when the Japanese drivers do come out of that bubble, they don't quite have the same impact that that it's difficult because of the Europeans that go the other way. But somehow doesn't quite. Well, let's move on to number 8, who is the top World Endurance Championship driver, Kevin Estre. Nice to have a quick Kevin. Don't come along too often, to be honest.
Kevin is my middle name. So.
Is it? Brilliant. Gary's not my middle name, just to be clear.
I don't think Gary's his middle name either.
No. Now, basically, you said, like Vantor, had a brilliant season all the way through to win the World Championship with Porsche, but there was one standout moment that edged him ahead. So tell us about the standout moment.
For me, it was his lap at Le Mans, his pole lap. The checkered flag was out. He was still out on a time lap. Bang, he puts it on pole. The significance of that is that the Porsche was not the quickest car, not in race week. And actually, it was the quickest car at the test day, but the track was changing so much through that week. And certainly, we saw in the race that it wasn't a match, certainly not for Toyota and Ferrari. I don't think even for Cadillac either. The champions finished 4th in the end, 40 whatever seconds down, I think. But they weren't truly in the fight. They didn't have the quickest car when push came to shove, and that was the same in qualifying. But Estre maxed it out, 3 greens, which is quite interesting that he was only green. So he did his perfect lap in terms of full sectors, but no purples.
Which backs up your point, basically. He put the lap together, but
so he absolutely did it, and it was a lap that originally they weren't going to do because they were running short of fuel. The tyres, he could have changed tyres during the red flag, but they didn't think they had time because they had to get out and do a lap. The clock was ticking. So he was running short of fuel, was on old tyres, and he pulled out the lap. Traffic is significant in Le Mans qualifying. It is until now, not next year when they've changed the rules, but or the procedure. But it's all about getting a free lap. He got the free lap, but he nailed it. And he said, there's probably one corner where I think I could have done a better job on that lap. So that was just a great lap. But allied to that was just a top level, consistent performance, level of performance through the year. And that's why they won the championship, 2 wins, multiple podiums until the last race of the championship when they had already more or less won it. They were never outside the top 6, which is ultra important in a 8-race championship. And they would have finished in the top 6 there, even though they had a bad start to the race and were languishing down the order, but for Vantor having a bit of a nightmare and actually getting 3 penalties.
Which you said didn't count, but actually,
Well, it sort of does.
It
count.
does help,
Yes.
doesn't it, in
Yeah.
this
Helps his
comparison?
situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah,
With this.
I don't hold it against him, against Vantor, but I do think it's, another reason why I put Estra above him.
That seems fair enough. Well, let's go on to another Porsche world champion. Someone else who I think you could argue didn't have the best car either.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
take it off, sorry.
That's it.
Is that why he's so elevated here? Is that he didn't have the best car and he won the championship?
I would put that on as certainly one part of that.
So, number 7, Pascal Wehrlein. Go.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry,
You
yeah,
actually
yeah,
had
I'm
something
getting
like
ahead
that.
of myself.
Porsche Formula E driver, yes. Yeah, I would certainly say that he came in and grabbed that title under the noses of Cassidy and Evans, and consistency was his big friend, and was always a contender, but did not have the quickest package. Did not really start for most of the year, picked up the wins, the early season wins, but then dipped. But I thought that if you're going to win a title, that was one hell of a way to do it when the focus and the pressure's on other drivers.
We've seen with Formula E as well, it's very difficult to string together lots and lots of wins. Like the person that scored the most was actually his teammate, Da Costa, who was... We talked about a long time ago in at 50.
Yeah.
But Wehrlein's season was much more consistent. Like Da Costa's other results were pretty terrible.
Yeah.
But also the way he conducted himself and hung on in there in the season finale when really Jaguar had all the aces, it appeared. They had both cars up there, which turned out to be the disadvantage. They had both cars up there, they had track position, and somehow he came away with the second and the first and nicked the championship. So, like we said before, the reason that... So all electric racing is an acquired taste for some people.
Yeah.
But whether you like the cars or not, the level of the driving in it is very high. It's proper drivers that either could, should, would, or have indeed been in F1. So, they are. It's a very high level. So to become Formula E champion,
There are not many make weights. Are
no,
there?
they're all. They're probably, and the cars are getting quicker and quicker as well. Of
Yes.
course, in the first generation they were a bit slow,
Which makes it more proper in my eyes.
it does
I
feel a
think.
bit more proper, doesn't it? And also, the Gen 3 car is smaller than the Gen 2 car. It shows that
Yes, yeah, it
can
can happen.
get
It can happen.
smaller.
Yeah.
Please take note. Pretty much every other championship,
Yes, my championship as well.
especially F1. Yes,
But
that's true.
especially
Yeah,
F1.
That's true. Yeah. We are trying to address to 2026. Anyway, let's move on. I talk lots of other ideas for podcasts we've got as we go along. Number 6, Carlos Sainz. I find it really hard not to like Carlos Sainz, especially this year.
He's a smooth operator. As
he is a smooth operator.
Yeah.
One of the
He's
one
got a
of the-
serenity about him, hasn't he?
and he's so sharp as well, isn't he? When you've got it doesn't happen so much now because I think under Fred Vasseur, Ferrari is a bit more organised. But a couple of years ago, when nobody seemed to know what was happening with strategy, and Leclerc's going, "What are we doing? What are we doing?" Carlos just goes, "I'm coming in for tyres now." He was just calling his own strategy because he's just got that understanding. And let's face it, he's half a tenth of being absolute top, isn't he? He's as close as you can get, without quite being a top, the absolute top drawer. I thought he was brilliant this year.
Yeah, I very much agree. There was some real standout performance. Mexico was, like Leclerc, we'll get onto later, had a stellar year, but there were moments where Sainz did really show him up in certain scenarios, certain
absolutely.
races, and like you say, the cerebral nature, the way he can drive. I think he's a bit unlucky. I think everyone knows that he's a bit unlucky to be stepping down from a top team
Into Williams.
From
I
next
think he'll
year.
make the most of it though.
He'll make the most of it,
He's
for sure.
still young enough,
he's made
but
it-
experienced enough to be.
He'll make the most of it, but it almost has to be a stepping stone to somewhere else, doesn't it?
Well,
Lead the Williams resurgence. Well, we'll see. But focusing on this year, he's done really, really strong.
I'm going to say that, he's nipping at the heels of the next 3 Formula One drivers we're going to talk about. And there are 2 drivers from another formula between him and them. Should there be? So should we?
Well, is there a bit of artistic license in that trying to give a little bit of sort of credibility and whatever or not credibility, but sort of acknowledging the quality of other championships?
Yeah, but I'm going to say, okay, so here we go. Number 5, Scott McLaughlin. Number 4, Alex Palou.
Who I was going to say to do anyway, so let's go.
Yeah.
Go with it, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Palou didn't have such a good year.
As last year, which is
year.
why he did drop a place or
But
two.
he only dropped 1 place. right?
Yeah.
He still hasn't won on an oval.
Mm-hmm.
Should he be fourth?
I think
McLaughlin, okay, he had more wins and he looked the more rounded driver.
Yeah, that's
you know,
true, yeah.
this year.
Yeah.
But he was still third in the championship.
Yeah, not to
Although-
throw anyone under the bus, but yeah, this was obviously a little bit dictated by the top tens of series reports,
Right,
And
okay,
that's
yeah.
why Palou was ahead of McLaughlin.
Yeah, but I'm not arguing with that. I'm arguing
You're putting science.
Science.
Both.
science is behind them.
My opinion is swap McLaughlin and Palou.
Oh, right, okay.
And maybe you can put signs between those
Between
two,
them, okay,
But
yeah.
that's a different way of.
I can't decide whether that means on average we were right or completely wrong.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say.
Split.
Let us know
I'm
in
not
the
losing
comments.
sleep over this.
Well,
but,
I will. I have done. Let us know in the comments. In fact, if someone out there has got the time over Christmas or wants to escape the relatives or whatever, come up with your own top 50. There's a challenge.
With reasons and information.
Well, I mean, don't have to write the whole feature.
3,000 words.
That's like proper homework. That is. But then again, if you've done the research to come up with the 50, then you perhaps you should write it. But yeah, I mean, okay, on that particular front, should Science, McLaughlin, or Palou be fourth? Because I think you can argue it. I mean, Scott McLaughlin would have been champion without the Penske.
Yes.
But then
in a
Will Power
weird-
showed that he knew the rules and didn't use the boost.
Yeah,
and
so
therefore
you
didn't
can't
get.
bring him over the top. Yeah, in a weird way, they would have been level on points. It would have gone tiebreaker on wins. Which
McLaughlin's going to be IndyCar champion next year, anyway, isn't he? So
seems
it's a great
that way.
story, isn't it?
I
You know,
just
I
love
love it.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing. But to be fair, 3 titles in 4 years
Yeah, for
in a
Palou,
competitive championship like IndyCar is also
Yeah.
like,
Putting
that's-
together
yeah.
that campaign.
That's not fluke, is it? That's
No.
proper.
Yeah. I think putting together the full campaign. You're right. I think, as everyone sort of just said, didn't have the peaks, hasn't won on the ovals, but has won another title against opposition that is strong and probably getting stronger, particularly in McLaughlin's case in IndyCar.
Mm-hmm.
And
What was it, his fourth year or fifth year?
On the 4th full year,
Fourth
I think.
full, yeah. So
With,
yeah,
You know, did he never race single seaters?
It
before
is
IndyCar?
amazing.
And that's
Yeah.
that's why I
It's
just
just
love
really
the
cool.
story. Isn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
So
I want to go and like win Daytona and
Wouldn't it be great? You know,
T
one of the great
go and
become one of the great all-out.
maybe have a go at the
rounders.
Daytona 500 as well,
Yeah,
just for the
why
hell of
not?
it.
But yeah, so
I
with
like it.
Palou, all those things puts him, I'd say, in the Sainz argument, had the pressure of a title fight, which Sainz never.
Sainz
okay,
did
yeah.
make some mistakes as
Yeah.
well. Did bin it a few
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
didn't he? But
So for those points as well, I think Sainz is probably in the right.
was beaten by a teammate.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas those two weren't. So
No. Cool.
easy.
Well, we're going to do the next two together as well. I think these were probably pretty much the last decision we made.
This
We
came
left
down
the
right to
positions
the
2
wire.
and
Did you flip a
3
coin in the end?
to the last?
It
No,
landed on its
actually,
side
to be
as
fair,
well, so I was like,
to be
oh,
fair, the thing that decided was that Alex Kalinauckas went away, went through the full seasons for both Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc because we just couldn't decide who to put into second. I think actually until the Brazilian Grand Prix, Sao Paulo Grand Prix as it was a 3-way fight for first. But the battle for second was, we kept it open for as long as we could. And funny enough, I covered this with Alex in a previous Q&A podcast. So I'm going to throw it to you. Are we right, in your guys' opinion, to have Norris at 3, Leclerc at 2?
I've read the arguments for and against, so I've looked at it, and I am convinced that Leclerc basically fewer mistakes.
That's the key, isn't it? for
Yeah,
me?
the things that say did go wrong weren't necessarily his doing. Let's say the car upgrades that didn't quite work for Ferrari. He still sort of, I guess, raced around, for want of a better phrase. Put in some stellar drive. Okay, qualifying drives if you want to include Monaco, but yeah, Monza as well. Yeah, it's a very close one thing, as you said.
I don't think anyone who's watching or listening to this would object if we'd had them the other way round.
We
I
literally
don't
moved
think-
it backwards and forwards. I mean, for me, one of the, apart from the Alex's very in-depth effort looking at all their weekends and mistakes, Leclerc won a race that I don't think that they should have won. Italian
Yes.
Grand Prix, that was a win
Right,
again.
yes.
Whereas I don't think any of Norris's wins were against the odds, and in fact, I would argue that there were
Missed a
races
couple.
he should have won.
Yes.
He could have, he could have won at Imola. He could have won at Barcelona. They could have won at Montreal. Okay, these aren't all necessarily his fault, but I would say there were more. Norris had more opportunities to win Grand Prix and ended up with 4, and Leclerc had 3 from a much lower number.
Yes.
Yes.
I would argue.
So that means Norris's XG was higher,
Yeah. Yeah. True.
So
which I don't actually understand XG really. When but that's-
I was just going to move swiftly on.
Yeah.
Unless Haydn wants
XW expected wins.
Oh yes,
in this
yeah.
format,
Of course,
yeah.
yeah. I know. I don't get that. I think that looks
XW, yeah, that
That would be
yeah.
the foot in this scenario.
expected wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, certainly Norris's XW would have been higher.
Yeah, but didn't
Yeah.
then deliver on
Yeah,
that number.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but I think
Yeah.
that's because Leclerc and the first person on our list, who could it be, are used to running at the front of Grand Prix and winning races, and
Yes.
this was the first season that Lando Norris had a
Well,
race winning.
That is a
winning
good
car.
point.
I
Yeah,
think we'll
yeah.
see in 2020. But I think Abu Dhabi, like George Russell at Las Vegas, made it look easy. Lando Norris made winning in Abu Dhabi look easy, which is what the guys who are really on top of it do. And Max Verstappen does
Yeah.
week in, week out, and has done for the last
Yeah.
3 or 4 years. So
It's second nature to him,
exactly.
isn't
I
it?
think Norris has got there. Leclerc's probably there. I think Russell can do it. We know Hamilton can, if given the Alonso can, if he's
Yes.
ever going to get the chance to again. Which will be a record-breaking gap between wins. That
Is it over 200 races?
yeah,
then?
it's 200.
Is
It's
it?
200 races since the 2013 Spanish
Yes.
Grand
Yeah,
Prix.
right.
Yes.
Absolutely outrageous. One of the best drivers in the
Phenomenal,
world. Right. Well,
So-
let's get to number 1.
Yeah. I think again when we started to put this list together in its very early stages, the title race was still on between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, and there was this case of, well, somebody needs to do something phenomenal to put their head and shoulders clear in this, in terms of the overall top spot, and that conveniently did arrive in Brazil. So that sort of settled that argument, and then once the title was wrapped up, that was a given. Not that the champion is instantly number 1, but it tied up those things. And you looked at the overall season as well, there were just fewer mistakes a little bit. There still were mistakes, and that's why certainly wasn't probably his best season or his best number 1.
And what he did with a car that
Yeah.
I know he described it as a dog or whatever, which was a massive exaggeration, I would say, but still he did it. He didn't. We can say that for 50% of the season, he didn't have the best car.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there were
More
mistakes, weren't there? You know,
yeah.
there was the Monaco crash. There was the needless accident with Lewis Hamilton at Hungary.
Yeah.
Then there was the Austrian
Austria,
clash with Lando Norris. The points given away there, but he gave away fewer points than anyone else, I think, which is why he's number.
Yeah.
And I think he's probably right that his 2023 season was better, not because he won more races, but because he made fewer mistakes. I mean, I'm going to admit, when I messaged you, didn't I, after the Mexican Grand Prix, I was like, the person that drives like that should not be number 1 in our top 50. So I was on the verge of vetoing it. At
that was
point,
there. That was it.
because I just think that was obnoxious, the way that he drove, especially the second off where he had no intention of making the corner. But Norris made too many mistakes. Leclerc wasn't in the championship pressure, and then Brazil
7
was a
days later,
masterclass.
yeah.
And to be fair, actually Qatar, I think that
Very-
in a way is a more impressive win, because the Red Bull was not the quickest car that weekend. They turned it around, and he nailed the weekend, including slowing down for the yellow flags and noticing that Lando Norris didn't. And I don't hold anything against Verstappen for getting on the race. I mean, it's a bit annoying to hear it, isn't it? But actually, he's doing his job. I know the guy behind is closer to me through the yellow flag zone than he was.
Yeah, right,
he
yeah.
kind of lifted.
Yeah, he has-
just on top, not pulling away from the grid in Brazil, knowing the rules
Yeah.
and all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
Yes,
he's
it's-
much more on top of the game. Isn't
So much extra capacity between the ears, it seems, this year, that have, like you say, rightly or wrongly, and this debate goes on forever, using the rules to his advantage, you could say, but playing the game within the confines of those rules and making it work in his favour. And he did do that pretty much spot on all year.
The only thing I would say is that it wasn't as intense a title fight as he had in 2021.
No.
And he still made mistakes. I think if
Yeah.
somebody else had been there, able to string it together in a way that Ferrari couldn't and that McLaren couldn't, I think it would have been tighter, and he'd have been under more pressure, and then would we see more mistakes and all those sorts of questions. But ultimately, he won the championship quite comfortably in
Yeah.
a car that finished third in the constructors'
Well,
championship.
McLaren slipped up by not putting him under more pressure, didn't they?
Yeah,
Yeah, and the
that's
whole
probably
team orders
fair.
Yeah.
situation.
And he didn't have to worry about a second car. I know that we talked about Yeah, he said that he could have won the championship in McLaren or Ferrari. I don't think he would have won it at Ferrari. He might have won it in McLaren, but only if Red Bull was running it with a weak number 2, which is not the situation that Lando Norris was in.
No,
Because Piastri is 13th on the list. Sergio Perez, sadly, is
not number 4.
nowhere to be seen.
I don't think he was 51st this year.
He
wasn't
No.
51st, was he?
Not quite. It was last year was 50th. And that was
That was a discussion point.
on if you want to rewind 12 months, that feels like a lifetime ago.
It
now.
does. It feels like a lifetime ago since we started this podcast.
Yeah,
So well done to anyone who has kept with us. Hopefully you've enjoyed the ride. That's it for our top 50 drivers. Take a look at autosport.com or indeed the 19th December issue of Autosport magazine for the full rundown and explanations and extra interviews and all sorts of data and graphs and fun to explain how we've got to the list that you may or may not agree with. You can catch the previous episodes of this rundown, the top 50, in our channel. Have a look at the link in the description below to each video. Let us know what your top 50 list of drivers is, or that is quite a big effort, to be honest. Like, Gary's not wrong. We do spend hours and hours on it. It is actually our jobs. So we appreciate.
I'm sure people will attempt to. So
fair enough. Yeah, I would be interested if anyone could actually put a 50 together, and if it sort of includes lots of different championships and things. But if not, then I'm sure you can give us some feedback on who should have made it and who didn't, where the orders, where you don't like the order. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us and listening to, watching or reading our top 50 drives of 2024. We'll be back again soon in 2025.